Shalom, good morning. I believe in the previous video I have shared about the role of the husband and the family, especially between the husbands and wives. In this video, I would like to share about the role of the women to their husbands. So reading up from 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 1 to 6. And I'm not going to read all the verses, but as I go exposing and expressing the, based on the Greek and English, I will be reading through verse by verse. This passage, 1 Peter chapter, is a part of the household code in 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 11 to chapter 3, verse 12. A common feature in New Testament epistles. Peter has just addressed citizens in chapter 2, verse 13 and 17, and slaves in chapter 2, verse 18 and 25. And now turns to wives and the husbands, chapter 3, verse 1 to 7. But we are not going to do verse 7 because since we have done in the preceding video. Overarching theme is living as aliens and exiles in chapter 2 verse 11 in a potentially hostile pagan society. The conduct of believers in this social role, missionary weakness. The connective homoios likewise in the same way links the wife's husband, the wife's submission to the submission of all believers to the governing authorities and of the slaves to masters. This frame submission is not as a uniquely female burden, but as a broader Christian ethic of voluntary Christ-like humanity. See verse by verse. I'm not going to read the Greek verses, but I will just take a bit, phrase to phrase, phrase by phrase. Here, the submission, hopotasomaio, which means like submitting under higher rank person. Okay, this word is often found in the military realm. The voice is like the grammar is a middle voice. So in Greek we have three voice, while we have two voice in English grammar. But in Greek grammar we have three voice: active voice, passive voice, and middle voice. So this form hopotasomenoi is in the form of middle. In the middle voice. Okay, in the middle voice, which means that the result is for the person who does the thing, right? Okay, it is not acted upon someone, or it is not acted by somebody, but it is being acted out, but the result comes back to the person who acts. Okay, so like when the Greek says hopotasomoi, that means the result, the submission, the result of submitting, or the submission is the one who submit to the higher rank. All right, like in other words, the fruit of submission is not for the husbands, but for the wives. All right. So in here, submission, hopotaso, means submitting under someone's leadership. Okay, in a military atmosphere, it's like a sergeant is submissive to his general, right? Something like in that kind of atmosphere, this word hopotaso is being used. So this word means this word is used of Jesus' relationship to his parents in Luke chapter 5, 2, verse 51, and all believers submitting to one another also in Ephesians chapter 5, verse 21. Here, another word important is that idioi. All right, the idioi is your own. All right, so here Peter is not asking the wives to submit to just any husbands, but specifically he is asking the wives to submit their own husbands. That is why idois, the word idois means your own, which means not somebody else's husband, but their own husband. All right. So I mean, a wife is to submit under the leadership of her own husband. All right. So just husband. It doesn't matter he submit or does not submit under someone's, leadership. This is incredibly important because extremely important because some people find easier to submit someone as husband and or admire someone as husband or respect someone as husband rather respecting or admiring or submitting herself under her own husband. That caused a big trouble between the husbands and wives in the family. In order to avoid those unnecessary or unwelcome, unprecedented, and this kind of issues between the husband and wives, they should rather be submitting their own husband, right? And the next thing is that the word disobey the word, all right? Another phrase, disobey the word means apay theosin. Apay theosin toy logo, all right? Toy logo, all right? This means disobey the word, all right? Unbelieve the word, all right? That is unbelievers actually. When we say disobey the word or unbelieve the word, that means unbelievers. In this context, in those days, back in those days, a lot of women from the background of non-believing came to Christ and they were converted into Christianity by faith through grace. But their husbands still lived in disbelieving stage, meaning their husbands were unbelievers. In this case, Peter is encouraging the wives to submit even they are unbelievers. Even if some of your husband may be still disobeying the word, which means disbelieving the word of God, which means in other words unbelievers, you still need to submit under their leadership. All right, so under their leadership. So how? And how? Diates anas through faith. All right, which means through the conduct, lifestyle, through the conduct or lifestyle. Their lifestyle and conduct must show their submission to their husband, whether they are unbelievers or disobeying the word of God or against the Bible teachings. They are supposed to be, they were meant to be submissive under the leadership of their unbelieving husbands, because the biblical teaching is crystal clear that husbands are the head of the family, right? So the head of the family, in other words, they are the leaders. It doesn't matter they are believers or unbelievers. So they need to submit under their husband, though they are unbelievers. How? Through their conduct, all right? And through their conduct, not just behavior, not just behaving nice or good looking, but it encompasses one's entire manner of life, a character and citizenship, all right? So through their lifestyle and conduct, they are to submit under the leadership of their husbands. Another is that, and without a word, okay, in a culture where a wife preaching to her husband would be seen as like shameful and not disruptive, Peter advocates a powerful non-verbal way of witnessing here. In other words, Peter is saying, instead of preaching the gospel, you yourself be first the gospel. All right. So in other words, like the saying goes like this, actions speak louder than words. All right. So be actor. Be a practicer, not actor. Actor is another word. In here, I would like to use be a practicer. All right. Be a conductor. Be a good example. All right. In your submission, be a good conductor. You don't need to use your word not to do this and to do that. Like making some list that the husband should follow or some list the husband should avoid. That is not the way to win over unbelieving husbands, right? So the right way to win over the unbelieving husbands is to conduct themselves in a perfect way, in a harmonious way, by following the leadership of their own husbands, right? So how? So why do they need to be submissive under their husband? The result here, all right? The result is, like I say, it is a middle voice. They will be won, all right? This is the future passive verb form cardinal, meaning to gain or to profit. So the purpose clause Hina is clear. The evangelistic goal is to win the husband to Christ, not for her themselves, or for not just for the sake of their happy family, but to win them to Christ. The wife's conduct is her primary missionary tool. Otherwise, her teaching, words verbal, would be useless, meaningless, or powerless. Therefore, Peter is saying here that the wives should be submissive, because how? Through their life, pure conduct and lifestyle. Why? The result is that they may win them at the end of the day to Christ. Then they will have equally yoked family life. In this passage, Peter's again talking specifically those who came from the pagan worship to Christianity. Not those. It may also somehow, or some way, relate to a believer who married to the unbelieving husbands. But the Bible is clear that believers are not allowed to marry unbelievers. In case that if that had already happened, this verse should be applied to them as well. But primarily, this verse meant to be to those who were converted from pagan worship to the true God worshippers. So in that case, it could be used both in the Christian husband, wives who married the unbelievers, and from the wives, those who were converted from the pagan worship. So this is applied to them both. It is naturally, or is practically easier to win the wives by the husband. In other words, if the husbands are believer, it's easier to win their wives, and the wives it feel easy to follow their husbands to believe in religion. In contrast, men find hard to follow their wives' belief in religion. That's the fact, right? So if you happen to marry an unbelieving husband, or you came out of your pagan worship, another belief or religion, you better be still submissive under your husband. Then at the end of the day, you will win your husband over to Christ, and you will have a beautiful, blessed, and harmonious family couple, and the Lord will bless. I hope you learned something from this lesson or this study, and I will see you in the next video. See you.